feedback that you may have. This week is a special week, but we're also grateful for those that are here in attendance, in addition to Al, Wally, Terrence on the support side. If you have questions, feel free to direct it there. We also have a special guest who I'll introduce here in a couple slides. This is a private membership association. Some of the stuff we talk about may be forward-looking, and it really may look complex, but in the end, you'll find that it's actually pretty simple, a lot simpler in the current systems that are out there. But like so many of you help us to understand, we've got to make it simpler. So thank you for helping us to understand, to join the effort. If you have questions or if you want to get involved, at least live, you're welcome to do it at townhall.events or townhall.clear.events or rippleeffect.clear.events. So thank you for those that are in attendance. And I'd like to do real quick, and I wonder what the best way. Let's see if I can. I'd like to introduce somebody super special. Let's see if I can shift this view off. What's crazy is the people on the actual call will actually get a different screen, but I'll try and see if I can figure this out. So we're going to drop off the presentation side of it, and we'll jump into this. There we go. That's a good way to do it. So Billy, we're going to make you front and center here. So what we'll do is we'll just share. Oh, it's not going to work. Yeah, so it's just going to basically be online. It's the best way to be able to see it. So some of you will have to kind of understand what that is. Maybe there's another way. Yeah, there is another way. Here we go. This is going to work. Well, yeah, this will work. Do it. Dang it. Try and just pull it this way. So Billy is joining us from New Zealand. For those of you that have not worked with him before, he's very involved with the Aotearoa alignment, and he served New Zealand for a very long time. Throughout his lifetime, he's worked with different organizations, from the military to law enforcement, and he's a pastor for a wonderful organization, as well as he's ran for Prime Minister of New Zealand before Jacinda got in, or ran against her. For those of you that need a reminder, Dominion was the actual voting system that was down there, and as a byproduct, even though he had massive popular demand and then some, the numbers never added up. But we've seen that in different environments. We don't need to go through that. But he has dedicated his life for the last 2-3 years since the COVID outbreak to really helping to stop. Initially, what he was focusing on was some of the social distancing was literally killing, primarily by suicide, a lot of the youth. And he just said, enough is enough. This is wrong. He not only served in the military, he was in law enforcement. So he's a police officer in New Zealand. And so he went to actually stand up, not in an unpeaceful way. It was very peaceful. I personally remember the exact same days and the times and all of it when it happened. But he was arrested, and he was put on house arrest, and he's continued to be targeted. But we know what that's like, and we just understand that that's just par for the course. But he's here today under a very specific need and reality. And I'll pull up this screen that talks about this new Pacific coalition where multiple different kingdoms, here I'll scroll down a little bit so you can kind of see the different archetypes that are involved. So different kingdoms, nations, countries, states, counties. Counties are very important, believe it or not. And then companies/organizations or trusts. And there'll be other ecosystems such as communities, et cetera, that can basically tie in and have a voice, but also have a vote. And what happened in New Zealand, where Dominion systems took away the voice and the vote of the people, at least from a transparent and honest way. People could say, you know what, that's just a conspiracy theory. And it's really not. The software developer folks that actually developed the Dominion systems came out, raised their hand under oath, under video, and said, we were asked to develop a system that could basically win an election. All they had to do was plug in who they wanted to win, and it would automatically shift things. And because of lack of transparency, there was no way to have true accountability and visibility. But Billy has said, you know what? So I didn't win. Jacinda won. She went through the process of running the country. Since then, Aotearoa, or New Zealand, has basically gone through her saying, I'm done. She gave up early, and there was a new minister that was put in, and prime minister, and then there's a new team that's coming in. But in the similar type realities, and we all understand what those realities are, but Billy is different. And when I tell you he's different, you'll understand. When he goes through it, helps us to look at what is unity, what is alignment, what is really happening when we talk about this coalition. How is it the different this body here understands what councils are and how councils can actually come together, and they can create policy that can actually run technology and or service providers that can actually create governance, not government, but governance. And he understands how important that is. He understands
when we talk about this coalition, how is it the different weeks? This body here understands what councils are and how councils can actually come together, and they can create policy that can actually run technology.
Susan, there you go. Thank you, dear. Perfect. So yeah, if you join those rooms, you just got to kind of watch your mic because you're on a live mic. So, but it's really important for you to really understand his history before he comes through and stands up and starts welcoming and uniting what this coalition and this movement could actually mean, not just for one or two countries. As you all know, this last year in 2022, we've met with 19 different countries, 4 of which, maybe 5, by the end of the year, we'll be working closely with on rolling out these symbol types of systems that basically give governance back to the people, and it gives people the voice. It takes it away from the few and gives it to the many. And when the many can actually ask the right questions, they can actually get the right answers based upon the voice of the many. And so as we go through this report out where we're talking about the work that's happened, this is not live. This Pacific Coalition is actually something that is in the works right now. There's a lot of different kingdoms and nations and countries and ecosystems and different councils that want to actually join this. But it's really important to make sure that we understand that this is guided by the people, not a select few, including myself. So as we do this, we want to do it in total transparency. But that being said, I personally had the opportunity to live in New Zealand, or Aotearoa, for 2 years back in 2011 to 2013, and absolutely humbled, and probably some of the best years of my life. But the people are what was humbling. The culture, it wasn't just because it was a melting pot of a lot of different people from around the world. It helped me to see what true humanity was and that we're part of one family. But it really was eye-opening because of the connection of the people, not just to the land, but to what they called God. And with that being said, I'd like to turn the time over to Billy to really communicate his perspective and his experience, because since he dealt with a lot of these different things, he's been digging into what he calls the River of Lies. It's a 3-part documentary, and he is spelling out, not just from his own hand and voice, but from many others. And he's creating transparency on what's happening so that we can have a better future. And he really sees the way out has pieces to do with decentralization, which is why most of us are all here. So without further ado, I would just invite Billy to, one, let you feel of his heart, let you understand where he's been and where he's going, but also how we can come together from a welcome and unity within the Aotearoa family. Now, Aotearoa is the original Maori name for New Zealand, the island of the long white cloud. But you have to understand where New Zealand came from, and even Maori came from, the words. So they really mean something. And so he's prepared something that is unique and special, but I hope that you see the value in it as I have. And I look forward to learning more of these beautiful languages. So, Bill.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I think it's my second or third time being in a town council meeting like this. Especially a great privilege to be, and an honor to be a part of the Hawaiian Kingdom General Council meeting today. Brother Mike has asked me to open up in the traditional Maori way that we do things, and it's my great pleasure to share this with you. So if you would like to bow your heads and listen intently, I have an English translation for you as well. And so we'll explain what I'm saying to you, and then we can go from there. All right, let's go for it. Tuhia ki te rangi, tuhia ki te whenua, tuhia ki te naka o nā tangata. Ko te mea nui, ko te aroha a iu kraiti. Ko te wihi ki te atua me whakakororia tono ingawa katoa. Kia tau mai te manakitanga ki runga e te kingi a iu kraiti. E pai mairere ki iaia me tono whare me te kaupapa whakahirahira o tēnei wā. Hia hā te kaupapa i tēnei wā, ko te kaupapa mana motohake me te tino rangatiratanga ki te tangata takitaki o te ao. I roto whakakotahitanga o te iwi o te moana nui a kiwa me te Pacific Coalition. E te rangatere e Michael, e mihi mai koe, e mihi rawa atu ki a koe. Kia mātou whanaunga ki te Kingdom o Hawaii. Tēnā koutou katoa e runga e te korowai o whakawhanaungatanga. Me tō mātou whānau o nā hau e whā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā no tātou katoa. Ko whānau, ko tahi tātou ki runga e te kaupapa i tēnei wā. Nā reira e te whānau. Nā mihi mahana nui kia koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai rā i roto te ingoa tapu a tāhua a iu kraiti. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa e te whānau. So the translation for that family is this. Write it across the sky, write it across the land, write it across the hearts of the people. What is the most important thing? It is the love. It is the love of Jesus. I then go on to say, with regards to God in heaven, may his name be glorified forever, and may the care of the Lord Jesus and good fortune be upon his house and upon our purpose at this time, upon all of us. But what is our purpose? What is the purpose today that we've gathered for? It is for the purpose of self-governance and sovereignty for all of the people of the world. E te tangata takitaki o te ao. But I go on further to say that it is in the spirit of unity for the people of Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, that's all of the Pacific Islands, all the people that are involved in our family across the islands, across the Great Pacific. And I've also mentioned that we're coming together and that there's something that may bind us, which is called the Pacific Coalition. I then go on to make special announcement of our leader in this conversation and in this work, and that's Michael. And I've given him high regards. Secondly, what I've done here is that I've called all of us family, and I've also made special announcement of our relatives in Hawaii, and that we've gathered together under the korowai or cloak of familyhood, of familyness. And then I turned my attention to all of us from the four winds of the earth. Ngā haue whā is the word in Māori, the words in Māori that means people that are from the four winds. And I'm saying greetings to you all, greetings and greetings to you all, and that we are all one family. And then I go on to say a warm welcome to you all. Welcome, come, welcome. Whakatau mai rā, welcome to you, a warm welcome to you in the name, the beautiful name of Jesus. And then I say, and greetings and greetings and greetings to you all. So that's typically how we would open up a meeting like this. Well, one example of how we would open up a meeting like this in Aotearoa in New Zealand here. I just want to pay tribute to the work that Michael has done here, with spending the time and the effort, and of course plenty of costs involved with it as well, of coming together and creating platforms, creating councils, creating digital nations, whereby we can work towards that independence, that self-governance, that self-determination, and that sovereignty, whether as an individual or as a nation. The concept of decentralization is incredibly important, and I report on this several times a week on my podcast. And it's an important discussion, especially as we enter into the counter version of digital decentralization, which of course is centralization through central bank digital currencies. We of course know that we are going into the new era of international health regulations, which will ensconce digital surveillance on a global basis, controlling everything and surveilling everything from what you spend, how you spend it, what you're allowed to do with it, where you go, how you travel, your medical history, your financial records, whether you have a vaccine passport to travel. People think just because there's a lull in the COVID issue that things are going to go back to normal or are normal. But the problem with that is that Uncle Klaus Schwab, that I affectionately call him, has made it clear that to think that things are going to go back to what they were before COVID is just fiction. It's not going to happen. He said it very, very clearly. He said it, in fact, he said it many times. And once they say it out in the online world, it's there forever to see. So he's very, very clear from the World Economic Forum's point of view, who are involved in the fourth Great Reset or the fourth Industrial Revolution into a digitized control paradigm. And this digital control paradigm is going to place the entire planet, the global population, into a digital prison. It's coming. And the work that Michael is doing to provide an alternative is so vastly important. I want to really underline how important that is, because if we don't have something like what Michael is able to provide and help us to set up for ourselves, then we will be sucked into this brave new world of dystopian tyranny, and it's coming very, very quickly. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger. It's just the facts, the observable documentation around all of the statements I'm making today. If you want to know anything about it, just go to the White House website and have a look at the G20 declaration that was made on the 21st of November 2022 in Indonesia. And it talks all about the international health regulations in this brave new world that they're wanting to take the planet into. But it has a medical basis, and that from there is going to control everything. And I really do mean everything. If you want to know what everything is in detail, go and look at that declaration made by the G20 leaders last year. But the problem we have as well is that they are going to link medical and digital medical tyranny and surveillance with climate change. Why? Because climate change, of course, it's a global extinction level event, if you were to believe what they're saying. They've offered no evidence, but they have said it, and they've said it for a very long time and very, very loudly. In fact, if we looked at Greta Thunberg's Facebook page back in 2018, you would have seen a post that she said, "The evidence is clear. We're going to be dead in 5 years if we don't change things dramatically." Well, they've taken that post down, and we are still here. But it doesn't matter. They're still sounding it very, very loud. From the World Health Organization point of view, they're saying that an event like a global extinction level, of course, it's a public health event of international concern, and that's the new category that they're using to umbrella pandemics, epidemics, outbreaks, things like that. And what they're going to do, of course, justifiably, is because climate change is a global health event, they're going to ensconce the two issues together like this, and will seamlessly apply control measures that will control your medical, your travel, your financial, economic, and of course your personal emissions, and that'll all be registered and controlled, and there'll be penalties unless you obey that system that they're proposing is good for everybody, the greater good and collectivism. So again, the idea of a Pacific coalition is, to me, extremely exciting, because I've been looking at and involved with international indigenous trade for some years. I've looked at it closely. I've looked at it through the lens of the China Belt and Road Initiative as well, and that was completely terrifying for a lot of obvious reasons, as you might suspect. But I've looked at indigenous business in Canada, in the US. I've spoken to Tetaba, and had business with Tetaba, which is a very, very big multi-indigenous framework, if you like, or multi-indigenous representative framework based in the Philippines that deals with many, many indigenous nations across Southeast Asia, the Philippines included, of course. It's a very big system, organization, but it's affiliated with the United Nations, which is where you have a problem. The other part of this picture, of course, is our people in the Northern Pacific and in the South Pacific. And many countries have felt the impact of Western society and Western society's values infringing upon traditional values of indigenous people in the Pacific. Now, if I look at closer to home, to Aotearoa, which we are in the bottom of the South Pacific triangle, if you like, we have our family to the west. We have our Fijian family. We have starting moving from the west to the east, or northwest, where Vanuatu. We have the Solomons. Then we get into Papua New Guinea, into Micronesia, into these other places as well. We also start moving eastward to our family in Samoa and Tonga, the Cook Islands, Niue, and these Tuvalu, Kiribati, Nauru, of course, and then we move over to French Polynesia. And I've worked in most of these countries, or at least had connection to indigenous representatives from those countries. And the idea of a Pacific coalition from which we can come together and create a digital engagement platform like this is incredibly important, I feel, so that we're not victimized by these coming systems and coming tyrannical control measures. And I spoke at the United Nations in 2016 at the Indigenous Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues, and it was a complete scam. And I saw how the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, I saw that it was a complete scam. It's basically centered on that the UN approaches or has created a platform where they promise that the concerns of Indigenous people from around the world would be able to be heard, that their concerns would be able to be addressed and then appropriately dealt with. And then on top of that, they also promise these Indigenous peoples funding, that F word, funding. And so what happens is, of course, with the invitation from the United Nations to Indigenous peoples all around the world, many of which are colonized and under pressure, many of which are in poverty, the idea that you can be grafted into the United Nations fabric and made a member of their Indigenous family there is very, very appealing if you're losing your land and getting murdered, and if you're in poverty, not being educated, starving, all those sorts of things. And so what's happening is that the UN has provided a framework for which they promise funding to Indigenous people if they're involved with their United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The problem is this, as with everything like this, it comes with a very, very, very important sort of strings attached to it, to that funding. And United Nations are saying to Indigenous peoples, if you want to be in our system, you have to support our programs. And I think you know what I mean by that. So they're basically saying to the Indigenous peoples, yeah, we can help you. We can give you some money, but you have to endorse our treaties, our programs, UN Agenda 21, UN Agenda 2030, UN Agenda 2050, also the World Health Organization, World Health Organization's international health regulations, and also, of course, the coming global pandemic preparedness framework. It's been changed from a treaty now to a framework. But what's happened is they've hit a brick wall. There are a number of small island nations, we call them SIDS, small island developing states, a number of them are saying, hey, there's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this, and we're not supporting it. And so what's happened is the European Union have created a fallback position for the UN. And believe it or not, it's called the Samoa Compact. The Samoa Compact is an approach to over 100 nations to be involved in a project involving all of the World Health Organization principles. But what's happened there, they've had another snag. 32 countries have said no to it. And a lot of them are Pacific Island nations and also member nations, island nations from the Caribbean and also from Africa. So all of these, many of them are, of course, dealing with poverty. They've all said no to the UN money, to the WHO money. So what I think we have here is an opportunity to sort of intersect this type of behavior with solutions that we can offer our people, whether they be in Africa, whether they be in Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean, South America, Central America, Latin America, or in the Pacific. And I believe that we've got an opportunity right now to highlight the threats but provide the solutions, and that's really important. And the idea of a Pacific coalition to provide a voice for an alternative platform for voicing our own concerns, but also that provides a way for us to be able to talk, transact, share, do trade, have economic alignments, all of those things, cultural alignments, all of them, but one that's not connected back to the UN monster, and it truly is a UN monster. And so it's my great privilege today to want to say to everyone that sees this today that the work that Michael has done, and by the way, I just want to point something out really clear. Michael hasn't paid me to come here to say this today. I want to be very, very clear about that. Michael supports the documentary that I'm doing as well, but I'm here because I believe in the work he's doing, and I'm hoping that I'll be blessed and with an opportunity to work with you all on this as well. But I certainly want to encourage that if there was an opportunity where we could pilot a project like this, working from out of the beautiful kingdom of Hawaii, then I would, man, I tell you what, I'm there yesterday. I would love the idea of being able to work on this with Michael and all of you. Our Hawaiian people are very special to us here in Aotearoa as well. And I would really love the opportunity to advance this cause and this movement and this important work. From the Aotearoa New Zealand side, we have a number of issues with our people here in Aotearoa. We have a big problem with divisiveness. We have a big problem with divisiveness here. It's a common problem, especially with colonized people like us, where everybody is so afraid, everybody is selfish, and all these things, and we get into this circular behavioral pattern of never being able to go forward because we're too hung up about who's going to get what. You know, what is my benefit? What is my tribal benefit? Our people here are divided by tribe and by area, and so we may be one people collectively, but we are many different tribes, and that means therefore many different nations, similar to our First Nations family in Canada and the US, who I've spent a lot of time with. And so what I would like the opportunity to is to highlight the issues that we face, which are pretty much similar to all of the colonized people around the world, but especially in the Pacific, especially with Hawaii and our family in French Polynesia. They're the same. They're colonized by the French. The Hawaiians were invaded by the Americans, and we were colonized by the British. And so we share commonalities, not just culturally and with our shared history and heritage, but also with the problems that we're facing and that our children are facing. And so what I would love to be able to do is invest time in this project, helping the Hawaiian Kingdom to pull this all together in a way that can be a shining example to everybody else. I'm going to wrap up with just a very, very quick reference, if I may, to this project that I am doing, and that'll kind of hopefully give you a little bit more of a clue about who I am and what I do. I'm strangely enough, I don't know if I can, there we go, that's what I was looking for, there we go. I'm a documentary filmmaker now. I've done a lot of my life as you can probably work out. And I've done a documentary called The River of Lies in New Zealand Scamdemic, an investigative documentary whereby I've applied my investigation and research skills into really, really, truly working through data and information that tells us that we've had some major, major problems with the COVID narrative in New Zealand. Yes, what we've gone through here is no different to basically the rest of the world, accepting that our former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is one of the very, very, very self-appointed elite in the team of globalists that are bringing about everything that we're talking about today that is negative. And so this documentary here, by the way, you can find it on riveroflies.co.nz. That's riveroflies.co.nz. It is a 3-part episode. And first episode's pretty gentle. It's about dealing with the claims that the New Zealand government and other governments and WHO made about COVID-19. And I deal with them all. And I use their information to essentially debunk what they've been saying about COVID, that its infection fatality rate, PCR tests, masks, social distancing, lockdowns, elimination strategy, all those sorts of things. We deal with those. Episode 2 is will be about vaccine injury. And then episode 3 will be about where this is going and what it may mean to all of us. So thank you, Brother Michael, for giving me this opportunity to open up today. It's been a blessing, and I look forward to seeing today's presentation and hearing from other people as well. But God bless you all, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much, Michael. Oh, looks like I haven't changed back. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit more about my documentary then, if you can still hear me. Episode 3 is when we really look at some incredible stuff about what's happening, all the evidences of it, and providing some solutions. And that will, of course, involve the great work that Michael is doing as well. There you go, Mike. I'm not sure what's happening here, but if you'd like to take over. Now, if I had my guitar, like all good Māori people, I could have played you a song. There's our family there. Wow, look at those beautiful photos. Looks like Fiji. Yep, Fiji.
So it looks like I was just blabbing through a bunch of stuff and people didn't see it. But what this represents is the opportunity for folks to come together, whether it's with councils or coalitions, but to have a voice that can be united throughout the whole Pacific. And some of these photos that we were showing here earlier are of some of the, let's see if I can grab it. So yes, you're right. That was a Fiji there. This is actually in Fiji. This is actually the International Monetary Fund indoctrinating a couple different countries. Some of them absolutely saw right through it. Some of it didn't understand what way was up. They just know that they needed funding. And as you articulated earlier, you know, the World Economic Forum enables and understands, you got to understand what is economics? How does it work? Where does money come from? Who creates the rules? When you understand the answers to these questions, you understand why economics are in front of what we would call around the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which then enables the World Bank, which is really the Federal Reserve in the United States, and many other, you know, European ecosystems. But I want to touch on something that Billy had talked about. You talk about the French over in Polynesia or Micronesia, or Rarotonga. They're not too much. That ties under the belts of New Zealand with the Cook Islands, but French Polynesia, you could understand that the French controlled that ecosystem and New Zealand was controlled by the Brits. But what's interesting is in Vanuatu, both of those countries controlled Vanuatu, which makes up about 88 islands. But Vanuatu was actually able to stand up on its own. The problem is when Vanuatu stood up on its own, it actually took money from China. So no longer is it controlled from a flag standpoint of Britain and France, but it's actually controlled by China. And if you talk to them, they'll say that's not the case. But if you go there, like me and my family did for a month and lived through two cyclones and earthquakes and wonderful things that really gave us an appreciation for what the islanders go through. And that's another thing around how do you build self-reliance and resiliency within these ecosystems where cyclones can just come through and just take everything out within a matter of 24 hours. But what I'm driving at is in Vanuatu, they think they're free. And in a lot of countries with these Belt Road initiatives, China has done an amazing job of being able to offer money, just like the World Bank does, just like the Reserve Bank does, just like disaster relief and project finance do. But they basically are offering money to be able to build up ports and communications and infrastructure, which then if they default on that, they basically get. So China gets. So if you just open your eyes, you'll see that this stuff is becoming very real. And I know that many on this call understand pieces of this, but what we're talking about here is the ability for a coalition to be able to come together and actually start working together. It's not necessarily just one part of the world, So if you kind of look here where you've got a map of the Pacific, and then it ties to other regions, and there can be other regions that can come into this as well. But there's an initial recognition and an invite phase where whether it's a kingdom, a nation, a country, a state, a county, and I want to underscore county because that's a very big part of it. Why? Because the founding forefathers of the United States of America actually understood decentralization. They saw what could happen when the few basically control the many. That's why they left Europe. That's why they went to the United States to sacrifice themselves and their lives. And I'd also like you to understand the ages of some of these individuals and what they went through and what their families suffered with. But there's a lot at stake here, similar to what was at stake with the independence, the Declaration of Independence. For those that have not read the Declaration of Unity within the digital world, please take the time to do so. I believe it's just as important as the Declaration of Independence. But the goal for this is to have technology work for humanity instead of enslave humanity. And if we do it in such a way where it actually starts getting rolled out and adopted within different countries in their borders, it can actually go to many other parts of the world. So I know that there's questions, and this is here for you. So Billy is here. I'm just so grateful for his energy and effort that he's put in for so very long to dedicate his time and to go through the persecution that he's been through, but to still stay standing for what is true and right. It's people like him that make this journey and this fight easier, especially when you know that you're fighting for something that is actually not a war, that is a waste, and that death and destruction doesn't have to come at a cost that is just a waste for money and for gain, but for truth and for light versus darkness, and the opposite of what we and many have been taken from them, the ability to be free and sovereign and actually choose what they want. So please, we'd like to open up the floor to any questions or thoughts or comments. This is something that's been, go ahead. Please.
That may be me opening up my mic. How you doing, Mike? Thank you, Billy, for all that you do, and you too, Mike. Terence in Australia here, and I just added an article to the chat in Town Hall where the Australian government
Michael, can you hear me?
Blue residents and government their support, which is great until you tied in with the
Michael, can you hear me?
You know, or the powers that be behind Australia, and Tuvalu get wrapped into that network of entities. But I just thought you might find that interesting, and Billy may be aware of this already.
Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm getting the hearing question. Is that from you, Billy? No.
No, it's coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, so it looks like someone is in a different room. But to wrap up on that other topic, thank you for this link. This is very interesting. I wasn't aware of this, but you know, I do know that the gentleman we were working with, Simon, and for those of you that are not aware, I'll pull up real quick the work that there is there. It's Digital Tuvalu. And this is really the first country that signed up out of the 19 that we met with. And they're actually one of the least visited parts of the world. And their island is actually disappearing with global warming. So not only are they saying, hey, you know, shame on everybody for not doing anything, they're basically doing something for it. And some of the individuals that we've been working with, namely this gentleman here, Simon, he actually stepped down as Minister of Foreign Affairs and is running for Prime Minister here within this next 45 days. So hope that you can add him to your prayers. He understands the dilemma. He understands what's true and right, and he's willing to stand up for what is right. So we're getting a lot of feedback, but if you've got an open mic and if you got a question, feel free to go for it.
Michael,
hey,
can you hear
Michael,
me?
it's
It's
Beck.
Melbourne.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead, Beck.
When is the next meeting for the coalition for the Pacific? Is there an ETA?
Yeah, the goal is to just enable folks to be able to have and hold. We can hold this type of space to help facilitate it. You know, the Digital World Town Hall can help to kind of kick those off and facilitate them. So they would run around the similar times. And so if I were to pull that up, it would be in, you know, around 5:30 Mountain Time. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'd like to join. To join in some of those meetings. Yeah, I think I probably have a lot to say in terms of both sides of the parties, United Nations and decentralization. I do think when people understand the blockchain and how it actually works and understand what solution you're providing to humanity, it's probably going to be, the sunshine in their day.
You know, I had two conversations earlier today around that same conversation where it was meetings are being dedicated to really the signs and symptoms and problems of what secret combinations are doing, where they've taken over governments, they've taken over ecosystems. Sam, you're in the wrong meeting room, but we're happy to take your question if you want to. Just know that others other than Billy may not hear it. But go ahead, Sam.
Can you hear me, Bill? Yeah, can you hear me,
Sam,
Michael?
We can hear you, bud. Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Billy, first and foremost, we salute you, and we're very blessed to listen to you today. What you've been through with Ardern at the helm and what she's put the New Zealand people through, not dissimilar to what we went through here with Daniel Andrews, and pain and suffering a lot of people have had. My question is, we keep an eye and ear to the ARC that was released just the other week with Jordan Peterson in London. We are sort of looking for that alternative to this monster coming our way very fast to enslave us through all the systems that they're pushing.
Can you provide a little bit more context to the link so that we can know exactly what you're talking about so that we're specific in our response? Sam?
I think he's dropped off.
Okay. We'll go to the next question. Sam, if you come back in, feel free to send that link and come back in and ask it, bud. Thank you. I don't know what part of the world you're. Oh, you're still there. You're still there. What part of the world are you in, Sam?
Melbourne.
I'm in Melbourne, Victoria.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, if you want to.
Melbourne, Victoria. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking for that alternative. I guess, how do we get involved? How family, friends, etc., that are feeling this enslavement coming our way, this big tsunami of this monster coming our way through the WEF and all the stuff they're putting out to us. How do we get involved to be prepared for this digitalization, if you like, that we can operate financially, we can operate outside this this monster coming our way, so it doesn't hit us with a huge surprises 2030 agenda.
Here's a couple. Yeah. So the question for those who didn't hear it is how do you get involved and actually add value and make a difference? Well, first is you really do what we're doing here, where you actually understand and learn. What is decentralization? How does it work? Grab a phone, use it, stop paying Apple and Google to give your data away. You know, there's different models of the phones. There's also, you know, the ability for different technologies within it. So when I talk about that, I'd like to also give a report out on how it'll actually work on Apple as well. And then there's nodes and storage that you can be a part of as well. So if you go to either clearnode.com, or if you go to, and this will kind of talk to parts and pieces of how they work. It's like 2 hours, so there's only one model that's available. So if you come in, actually this is shipping, so it's not pre-release. So you can become a node on the network is another way. And then those two pieces, so when we look at the model, you really have this simple model where you've got access devices and then decentralized storage and nodes that enable the decentralization to actually occur. And then you basically are part of it. So it'll go through different systems, you know, but what we're rolling out right now, and we really want to make sure that people understand it, is these different ecosystems, kind of like you, Sam, you're in Australia. You know, the other caller was, I think she was also out of Australia. We've got a lot of folks that are in colonialized countries, whether that's New Zealand or Canada. But when you really dig into it, they're in their own ecosystems, whether it's a community, whether it's a state, whether it's a county or a province, whether it's a country or what you'd call a nation or a kingdom. And I know people may look at those as the same thing, but they're very different. But they can also work together in unison. But what's been stripped from people, especially with Dominion type voting systems, is their voice. There is no real transparency, even though we have technology at our fingertips, and it's amazing what we can do with it. But if technology is controlled, then everyone is controlled. And so you can basically start using technologies that are open source based technologies that focus on decentralized technologies. So really, this is the solution, centralized versus decentralized. You just picked decentralized to this mess. And we're talking about secret combinations in different categories, whether it's media or health or technology, which is what the Clear companies focus on combating. And then these different ecosystems can come in and take over government. I mean, if you look at what's happened, like with media, I mean, Twitter was purchased and they've proven that there was coercion, that there was massive fraud that happened, massive censorship. And whether you're hiding the truth or you're telling a lie, it's the same thing in my book. But you basically have private combinations like you see on the left and public combinations on the right. And the public combinations are creating things that we all know about, like dollars and cents and currency and coins and however you want to call, a renminbi or a mark or a yen. But on the left, they basically work within these circles to come together with an organization like the IMF. So when we talk about this IMF ecosystem, you can basically see, like, this is actually this whole front row, except for this amazing woman and this wonderful man, myself. The rest of them are actually all employed by the IMF. The rest of this back row here are actually different representatives of different countries around the world. Amazing hearts, amazing. they're there trying to do the right thing. So we're getting a lot of feedback, Sam, but did you have any other questions or thoughts or interactions?
I guess I'm in the finance game, Michael. That's what I do for a living. I've got my own financial planning firm, so I look after people's investments and so forth. And a lot of the banks now here are moving to, we've got now directors' ID pushed down by the Securities Commission. You can feel that the banks are wanting digital IDs to be part of this security system, and I guess. I've had a clear phone now for about a year and a half, possibly 2 years, and you struggle through, you work through what you got to download, your apps, etc. And I'm not sure if I've gone far enough now. I want to keep going further and further, and in terms of working outside this enslavement system that comes. And obviously, I've got my own personal affairs to look after, and other things. But we work with a very stringent system, which is fine. At the same time, I'm just very, very conscious of what's coming down the pipeline towards us. I just want to be. What's the question, really? There are a lot of people that are looking for those alternatives, and I guess with James doing a great job to be in front of us and reminding us of how we can do it. I'm just wondering whether it's worth considering these ecosystems that we talk about, that Australia or even can become its own hub to sort of have a focus on itself to help people roll out, the alternative. Phone systems and saving data and all the rest of it, or even state by state, because we're a big nation geographically, but we've all been pushed very hard, like the New Zealand folk, our brothers there, and we're just want to keep looking at those alternative mechanisms.
You know what I'd recommend, because I know that there's many Australian folks on this call. I would recommend that you just set a time. I mean, Becca asked a question, when is the meeting? And it's really, who's it for? And some of the stuff we're talking about is, Aotearoa, the Hawaiian Islands, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Fiji. These are ecosystems that are spinning up. And then there's one that's actually I won't be specific on the county, but it's a county on the Pacific Ocean where we believe that water law and land law can actually bridge a divide, which is a whole other conversation, which we'll get into on future calls. But what I would challenge the folks on this call from Australia, that you might not know each other, but you get organized and you create your own council that actually joins this coalition. And you come up with what it is that you want to see in your country, in your part of the world. It doesn't matter if it's a family, if it's an area, if it's you name it. I mean, there's so many different ways you can come together. But I think your question is all around, how can Australia actually unite and do something different, especially when we talk about, things like this.
Yeah.
So, I would challenge you. You're with really good people, from Terrence to Becca to, Sam. I don't know if you guys all know each other, but maybe if you could.
Yeah, I put my email address. I don't know if Sam can hear me, but I'm happy to
Lost you there, Michael.
jump on a call with him and take him through the ecosystem.
So, Sam, you're in a different meeting room. If you click on one, if you click on one of the chat links, it sends you to the right meeting room, and you'll be able to hear a bunch of other folks that are actually from Australia, and they're sharing their contact information, and they're excited to connect with you and to start up a cadence of meetings. I do know that a cadence of meetings, when you set it on a regular basis and then you drive that accountability, just like every week you can plan on this meeting happening, unless somebody's dying or there's a holiday that hits on the same exact day, this meeting probably only misses 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year. So every week out of 52 weeks, there's going to be 48 meetings. If you create a similar cadence, and it doesn't have to be weekly, it could be monthly or quarterly, but as long as you just come together and you set some objectives, and this technology's out there, there's no reason why it can't be duplicated for each country. That's the goal. So every country to actually have its own systems. similar to what we see here. This is unique to Tuvalu. It may be shifting in different ways, but the goal is to use open source technologies within a purpose-driven ecosystem focused around enabling decentralization to actually provide freedom and sovereignty for all humanity. It's not just one culture or community or cadence or country. It's literally, it can be interfaced from country to country, especially when we start talking about assets to assets, when you start understanding that. So thank you for your question, Steve. We'll go ahead and go to the next one if that's okay. And if you want to jump into that other meeting room, you'll find other friends that are from the same part of the world that you're in. So, okay. Any other questions or thoughts or feedback? I got your message, Steve, and happy to do so. So you can ask any of the support people for my contact information. Thank you. I look forward to connecting with you. Other thoughts or comments, questions for Billy, feedback for Billy? He's dedicated his life to serving others. He's raised an amazing family and understands that it may be time to shift gears. I know he's still in that family mode, but
shift it up. I tell you what, I'm even considering a relocation. I mean, ultimately, as Sam in Melbourne was just saying a minute ago, that this is coming down the pipeline, and it's really not going to matter where you are unless you have people that are aware about this and are seeking to combat loss of personal and national sovereignty. It's going to be very impossible to escape it. As you say, Vanuatu is in a funny position because there are some pretty switched on people there in that government who don't want to be a part of what's coming. What they did do, surprisingly, they did sign on to the Samoa Compact with the EU, but it hasn't been ratified. And my understanding is there's a bit of push and pull within the Vanuatu government. So we'll be watching that very, very closely.
My last knowledge down in Vanuatu was a couple weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago, and it was the government is going through another replacement process by choice, and the EU is pushing back on recognition of Vanuatu for whatever reasons. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, they are, as you know, having been there, they're an interesting country. You've got English speaking, French speaking, and then you've got Wantok language as well, or Ni Vanuatuan languages. It's a real mix of really interesting people there. That's for sure.
Actually, there's 88 islands and over 80 languages.
Crazy, eh?
Yeah.
Go and row your canoe to an island an hour away, and you're in a different planet. Amazing.
Yeah.
Pacific's amazing, that's for sure.
Other thoughts, Billy? Any other things you want to mention, or?
Yeah, just hearing what Sam in Melbourne was saying. The Victorian government was very similar to the New Zealand government under the leadership of the then Premier Daniel Andrews, who's now resigned. We expect him to appear in some swish high paid role with the UN or one of the affiliates. But there's a lot of damage there that has occurred, a lot of scarring around vaccine harm, mandate harm, lockdown harm, all of that, loss of civil rights, human rights, the same as what we've had here in New Zealand. But I think, just talking about blockchain, as Becky was talking about as well, blockchain is a really important aspect to all this. It's something that I'm learning about at the moment. And, it's something that's going to be really important in the digital space as well, where you operate, Michael.
Yeah.
Especially around money, over here in New Zealand, I've had two bank accounts closed down. I had an ANZ account closed down just because they didn't like me. I had a ASB account, which is I've been a customer of ASBs since I was a little boy, on and off, and my first mortgages were done with ASB, and yet they cut me off, closed my bank account, so that was pretty exciting. And so knowing what to do with our funds is going to be really important as well, because we need to hold on to our privacy and our ability to transact for as long as we can until they really do shut the door and bolt it.
Yeah. You're spot on. And I would go back to the comment around what is the World Economic Forum? And it directly ties to exactly what you just said. If you create or control the money, you make all the rules. And when you really understand who is actually behind it, it's not that there's not value or things where people build a product or a service that others don't want, but it's the system that people choose to be a part of to actually deliver it. And in the end, we all have a choice. I saw a sign yesterday within a normal store. This is a health food store, where it said no Canadian dollars accepted. And I said, well, why Canadian dollars and not Japanese dollars or marks or yens, or why just Canadian? And it's just interesting to see. First off, there's no cash; it's all credit card. But in this case, they're starting to shut down different countries' credit cards and not recognize them. And so you have to ask yourself why. And when you really get to it, there's a reason why some of us believe in this book called the Bible, and they talk about money changers and why there was such a disgust around using and controlling another, or taking a choice, whether it's perceived to be a right choice or a wrong choice, away from another. We're here to choose. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. In some ways, we're even here to sacrifice and to suffer and to serve one another. And in so doing, we can learn lessons. We can learn about ourselves. We can learn about the amazing earth that we get to be able to stay on, live on, breathe on, exist on, create life on, and live life. And, I know many of you may look at the news and the headlines, and feel dismay, but thank you for joining every week and being part of the solution, at least a part of a solution that can help combat what's going on. I know there's a lot of people out there that are doing good. They're caring about unity. They're caring about one world, one people. And Billy, it's been an absolute pleasure to share life and time. And I look forward to a bright future together to help Aotearoa and not just the Maori people, but Polynesians and Micronesians to stand up and to lock arms and to unite. And hopefully this Pacific Coalition is something where that can be understood, and then the systems can be realized and adopted, and then exchanged between them. We saw a request between Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and Fiji with different currencies, but close to one another, to come up with a trade agreement with a new digital asset. And so there's fun, different projects everywhere. But I don't mean to scare, but I do want to underscore the importance, the massive importance of having a sense of urgency and to not waste a day.
Yeah. Oh, completely.
Yeah.
I mean, we already have it in Europe right now. I've got a report on my laptop that I received yesterday. And already in the UK, you cannot go into certain places unless you have a digital clearance app on your phone, and you've got to use it to walk in to go and buy a meal or buy food or groceries. It's already being deployed in Europe. They've now signed an accord that just needs to be ratified in the European Union Parliament, which says they're going to accept an EU central bank digital currency. And once that happens, everything will go into it, and including your medical history as well. And that's in the European Union. Now, we know that once it goes there, it's going to spread out to the other relatable economies. It'll hit Canada, it'll hit America, it'll hit Australia, it'll hit New Zealand, and then once all of those bigger economies are sucked into this, then it's just like when you have a black hole. Once those countries in there, then the black hole's created and it sucks all the other economies into it, because the smaller economies need to play by the big boys' rules with the way that the rules are set at the moment. And so that's why decentralization, the quicker that we really get our act together, figure this out, and implement the decentralized solution that you talk about, Michael, the absolute better. And it's an urgent situation.
Yeah, that's kind of where the innovation comes in terms of blockchain and how it operates behind the network. So it sounds like digital currencies, they have their own blockchain, but if we look at it in terms of like, how can we innovate on it and remove some of probably the scarcity mindset that people have around control? I think when we come from like a creation standpoint of, how can we add to our humanity instead of like not choosing sides, that's how I think in terms of blockchain. I know there's this kind of control measure that's coming in with CBDCs, but it's like, this is why I love decentralization and why the education around it and the awareness around the blockchain is misunderstood, I think, in the awareness. But in terms of like what we're doing inside of the decentralized governance, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think more people are going to love it when they begin to understand more about how blockchain actually works behind the networks, because you can't see it. You can't see blockchain. It's just software behind the API layers, right? And it's like an interface in front of the operating systems that we use. And even from a telecommunications standpoint, when I have done my pitches, the awareness and the education around blockchain is just lacking. So I think if we come from an education standpoint and say, no, this is what, centralized decentralization means, and then true decentralization is, then we can actually support the individual and their data. So I do think eventually like the way that we think is going to come together, and we're going to understand more about, maybe this is like a digital change agent's journey, like in these big organizations that operate from digital services, because I don't think the education around it is there.
I think you're spot on. And the educational process that the IMF went through in this activity was to teach them that decentralized systems were the future. But when they actually go through the process of helping them to understand this is how you use decentralized systems, the outcome is they're centralizing decentralization. And you see this all the time. Almost every single issue with any kind of, now, first off, I want to make sure I underscore this. The crypto ecosystem, where people are just standing something up that doesn't have value behind it, I don't personally agree with it or promote it or drive at it. But what I'm trying to articulate is, if there's loss or fraud, it's because the people don't actually own their own assets and their own keys. And so the value that the digital world layers on top of this, and even the ability for the specific coalition to even exist, ties to the technology within the digital world on how key management is actually delivered and propagated. So what I mean by that is how you're not centralizing decentralization. So for instance, when we started these conversations, no countries have ever deployed a decentralized asset or technology within their financial systems. Since then, over the last 5 years, well, maybe even 3 years, there's about 4 or 5 countries that have deployed Bitcoin specifically as a currency within its country or a means of exchange. The problem is they're starting to realize a couple different things. And I'll try and pull up a chart that'll really turn on some lights here for you. Hopefully I can get to it quickly. So this chart represents measuring 14 trillion or 14 billion within a 24-hour period, and they're looking at two things: what does it cost and how long does it take? And some folks, if you do the math, you literally, Bitcoin can take on average about 10 minutes to do full settlement for a transaction. These countries that I just mentioned roll out a technology on top of it called the Lightning Network that basically speeds up that transaction so it's real time for the merchant and the user, and then later on after the 10 minutes it gets done. But what's happening to set that account up is the user says, this is my public key and this is my personal information. And that's the same nightmare that this body teaches them. You have to do KYC, you have to do it in this way. And with the financial systems, you just don't need it within this ecosystem. Now, that being said, if you're going to do things that are going to tie to a particular dollar within a banking system where it's an on-ramp or an off-ramp, you do need it. But this cost to send 13 billion within 24 hours to be less than 2,400 equivalent US dollars is very minuscule. So think about that. $2,400 to send 13, and some people may say, well, that sounds like a lot of money. But if you compare that to Ethereum at 26 million at the time of this chart, and it's even gone up from there, versus Visa, and in some cases the merchant pays for this, in some cases the end user pays for it if there's disclosure. But 336 million, and that's only at, what is it, 2.4% is the average. Sometimes it goes up to 3.5%. So think about the difference between 336 million, which is Visa's charging, versus 2,300 or 2,400 versus 10 minutes. And how long does it take for a Visa to actually truly process? So for the individual to say, I want to buy this, I swipe my card and I can actually give the money to the merchant, it doesn't take 3 to 5 seconds. It actually takes 2 to 3 days, literally. So in the same instance that Visa is doing a middleman for transactions, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network is doing the same thing. You have to ask yourself, who owns the Lightning Network? Visa. And who owns Visa? The banks. So it literally goes back to that secret combination that I was trying to talk about in comparison to the digital world transactions. And some people may say, well, this is, I don't understand how it works. And there's some beautiful comparison charts, but we won't get into it right now. But less than $1 per transaction. It's actually like 1,000th of a cent. So you do 1,000 transactions for a cent. And then, so when you talk about 14 billion in value, you have to add up how many transactions that was. And then at 3 to 5 seconds for full settlement. Our average we're seeing right now is 5 seconds. That's full settlement. That's not, we're going to let the transaction happen and then, 24 hours, 48 hours, send the merchant their money if they want to. And that's a whole nother level of complexity. For instance, there's this thing called UCC and how they can actually take money and who owns the merchant providers. If you look into any merchant provider in the world, Global Payments down to Stripe, if you dig into them, you will find BlackRock or other ecosystems that are controlling these companies from an ownership standpoint. If you don't believe me, go do your own research. But this is the financial system that we're talking about within these secret combinations that basically come up with this problem statement that is very, very real. The financial industry is not in this particular chart, but it's right here. Literally these secret combinations, banking is one of them. I won't get into it because you guys all understand this, but it's time to stop talking about the symptoms and to actually start doing something. And I think Steve's question was very good. It's what can you do? And it's not just you have to buy a clear phone. That's not it. Or you have to buy an Armor phone or, these different models of phones. That's not it at all. As a matter of fact, there's some new phones that are coming out for what Billy was just talking about from Aotearoa, in the Pacific Coalition. We hope to see the Hawaiian Kingdom a very strong player. Today, they're not within this ecosystem, but we hope to see the Hawaiian Kingdom standing up, not just with the hardware and software, but a combination of, understanding physical and digital governance, not governments, but how to truly govern and lead another person. And when we lead others, we're actually giving that right, or we should give that right to the rightful one that actually gave us the opportunity to have breath and life. And so,
I'm not fading away.
Say again. If we're doing this in the right spirit, in the right intent, it shouldn't be for gain or for glory or for ego or for pride. You know, I personally have to say that because of the role that I've been given the opportunity to be in, you know, there's a lot of people behind this work, but you don't see them. What you see is me as a talking head blabbing all the time. But there are amazing people that have dedicated their life and their resources, not just to building the technology or supporting the technology, but to driving awareness for the technology. And I commend each one of you for, even if it's just thinking about things in an evening or while you're driving or while you're in the shower, of how you can actually be a voice within your own sphere and circle. Create a community, create a council, join a coalition, you know, start getting involved, just like you're talking about. How can I actually make a difference? In time, just like my father-in-law would say, time is a great healer and great revealer. And even though there should be a massive sense of urgency around
freedom, empowered choice.
Yeah. But it's up to you on what you do and where you do it. You know, I can tell you by visiting these 19 different countries and ecosystems in the Pacific this year, at least for the first time I came to Hawaii, I went to every one of the islands, at least the main islands, you know, 5 different islands, and there wasn't a sense of urgency. But I can tell you that there are people on every island that have a desire to connect with the right spirit and to do the right things. And I hope that gets realized in the very short term, even though it takes a long time and it's been a long haul to get to this point. But I hope that shortly we can see the right alignment and the right spirit for the right reasons. And Billy, your involvement and your unwavering commitment to stand up and do what's right, even when your own freedom and your own pocketbook and your own choices and privacy and your family's protection can be compromised. We commend you for standing up, for doing what's right. And I hope that other nations and kingdoms can stand up and see what's right, and they unite, they stop. You know, you talked about a mentality. I call it a crab mentality, where when certain individuals start seeing the light and crawling up and getting out, the other ones will just pull them back down into the bucket. But it doesn't have to be that way. So, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. Billy, if you could just say a couple final words, even if it's just a simple prayer. Would you close us today?
Oh, would it be my privilege to do that? And I'm looking forward to being more and more ensconced in this work with you, Mike. And to everyone, I just want to pray that you'll be in God's care. Let's bow our heads quickly. Father, we thank you for today, for this meeting that we've had. I thank you for all the people that have tuned in to listen and to be a part of this family. May we all stay strong, Father, and we ask for your protection for ourselves, our loved ones, our babies, our families, our friends. We pray that they may be all in your protection and care, and that you will continue to work on our hearts to lead us to your truth, and that we may stand in the freedom that you've given us, a God-given gift, Lord. We treasure it, we value it, and our part is to value it and protect it, and we ask for your help to do that. Please lead us and guide us. Thank you for this time. Thank you for our breath, our life, our energy, and thank you for Brother Michael and the work he's doing. Please empower us, Lord, with thy Spirit. We pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay.